Well, we're waiting in the queue to go live. Please stand by. Remain in your seats. Hi, it's Warren Whitlock here with another distributed conversation. Glad to be with you all because we get a chance to talk about what's going to be happening in the future. We usually talk about people who are heavily involved in this technology or other. Today, I've got a guest, Daniel Friedman. He is he's a postdoctoral candidate at University of California at Davis, and he's working on something called the Complexity Weekend at complexityweekend.com. So first of all, welcome to the show, Daniel.
Thank you.
And I want to ask the obvious question here: is complexity? It seems like I've spent my whole life trying to simplify things and be told to live a simple life, declutter, get organized, blah blah blah. Complexity? No, you want to straighten that out. You don't want to explain things to people and lose them like postdoctoral candidates do. You want to be, short and sweet and to the point and make sense so the person with an 8th grade education can understand it. And here it comes along. Are you just here to screw us up with all this complexity, or why Complexity Weekend?
Thanks for that introduction, Warren. So I'm happy you went with the obvious question first. And I'm looking forward to talking about complexity as a jumping off point, because that's really how I see it. It's an open door to an approach and a way of thinking that is beyond academia. It includes practice as well as theory. And it's a really accessible, and it's an idea and an approach that crosses a bunch of different domains. So it's a great way to start the discussion. And I'm sure we're going to talk about a lot of topics in the coming little bit. So
right. I've only talked to you once before, and we were all over the place. And I was taking notes and going like, this guy thinks a little bit differently than other people. I don't normally talk to whatever you're called, postdoc.
Just a researcher.
A researcher. Joe College, it wasn't smart enough to go out and get a job, practical smart, street smart, and decided to go live at the university for the rest of his life. Well, okay. I'll give you that's a very much prejudiced opinion. So open it up and explain to me what's good about complexity.
There's so many places to respond to or to jump in, but I'll just start with what complexity is. So complexity science is a long-running thread that is related to a lot of other threads in history and in thought, like design thinking, systems thinking, cybernetics, feedback systems, innovation, systems change. So there's a lot of areas that are related, and they're kind of like holism related areas. They're thinking big about big systems, large timescales, complex interactions. Now, a lot of people think that complexity is a synonym for intractable or incalculable, because a lot of these fields, or at least in how they're applied, can lead to just a mist of qualitative details. So there's feedback loops, but then what do we do? Or, okay, everything's connected, what do we do? Complexity science as an approach does two things that are a little bit different in relationship to some of these other fields, but draws heavily upon them. So it's kind of a yes and with relationship to other fields. It's not an exclusionary approach of ideas or people or anything. It's really about integration here. So the two things that complexity science does that are really different, and then we'll talk a little bit about Complexity Weekend, is first off, it does make contact with some of the more quantitative fields. So the STEM fields, and that includes a lot of research that has been cutting edge throughout the past decades in many of the foundational or the precursor aspects of things that are now known as machine learning or artificial intelligence, robotic systems. These kinds of complexity approaches, the idea to look across systems to learn about how different patterns might play out in the real world. How can the ant colony help us design the robots? We'll leave it to the engineer to design the metal that's strong. That's really important. But then at the software level or at the behavioral level, could we look to nature and abstract the right characteristics of swarms? Now, design thinking or biomimicry, which again is the critical insight there, could draw many insights, but you might want to take it to a level of quantitative detail or of a simulation or a sort of control theory aspect that's going to require going beyond systems flowcharts and mapping approaches, which are precursor. So complexity science goes from these more holism oriented fields, and it also makes contact with quantitative research. And that's why a lot of people who are interested in complexity are interested in topics like distributed databases, like blockchain, as well as things like thermodynamics or information theory and fundamentals of computing. So it makes contact.
Yeah. Hang on. That's a complex answer.
Okay.
So I'm the simplification guy. So the way I'm looking at it, and how does that affect my business, my investments, my plans for what the next 60 years are going to be? Because I'm planning to live that much longer, and what the world's going to be like. I'm excited by what we're going to see. But one of the themes I've seen in my whole life is a move towards we have more and more things going on, and actually outside of academia, most of the fields you're talking about, you're going across are things we go like, I don't have time to bother with that. I need to know whether or not I'm going to make payroll next week. I need to know whether or not I'm going to get the project launched on the right date. And but what fascinates me about this as I think about it is how it lines up with something I've said, which about 20 years ago, I one day woke up and said, life is just so interconnected. And my philosophy of life changed. I got rid of the business. I started working out of my house as a consultant, mostly not because I was retired from the business and ready to consult and help others. That's all good. But what I liked was the idea that I could change what I was working on. I could combine it together. And I can see something that works in watching an ant colony, and I can apply it to my life. And I think that's what people get, they get a kick out of going out in nature and seeing something. And, and scientists studying ants are just kids that never got over that thrill. Marine biologists are just people who never got over the cool things that are in the ocean. And we all like are reflections of who we are. Who I am is I am a very complex person. I am across all sorts of fields. And I'm often told, settle down and go work on something because you got to make payroll next week. So that's cool. So
let me just respond there.
Good.
I jumped in from one end with my first answer, which is It's related to all these ideas and thoughts. Let's go in from the other end. So the simplest way, and there's many ways to say it, is that complexity is about dealing with the world as it is. And there's a few corollaries or downstream consequences from dealing with the world as it is. It means that you often focus on approaches rather than what department or what class it's related to. So, that's like innovation and entrepreneurship. Yep. The second thing there is it's a focus about the teams and the communities and the relationships and the personal development, because you think the best thing we can do to prepare is not make a model, it's strengthen our team's relationships. And then the third piece is it relates to our experience in the real world, because humans, no matter how we got here, the point is we're in a special and sensitive position to be making the right kind of decisions that the machines that we have and may have forever are always going to come back down to us. So we need to make the best of what we have. And that's the lived complexity. And that's the applied complexity that we try to raise up in Complexity Weekend as a community of practice, because it sounds very abstract to many people. And for some it is, but also there's this total end that has to do with application. And in this emerging future, we're working with projects like Complexity Weekend, and encourage everyone just to, no matter when they're listening to this, check out that website, because that's where we want to be developing the intersection of applications and accessible complexity and all possible levels of familiarity, and just being inclusive to anybody who wants to participate. That's the most important thing. I'm sure
some of the smart people watching and listening are going to look at this and say, gosh, I got to know more about this. This is exactly what I wanted to study. Other one of us are, trying to figure out how to get our, there's people listening right now who are saying, I really do got to get off this run and go to work because I've got to get the project done today. And that's fine, and I believe, because I used to be like that. I used to be like, I get up in the morning as quickly as possible, get out of the house, leave the wife to get the kids off to school, get down to the office where the employees start showing up, and I want to be there, and I'm there until they all leave. thinking I've got to get as much done. Oh no, I didn't get that project done. Now I've got to go work another 3 hours. And it was at the office. It wasn't remote. There was no smartphone. And I had to get, I just had to try to cram so much into the day. Well, pretty soon I found out I was cutting out extracurricular activities, wanting to leave early from any meeting I was in, trying to get done because I was trying to focus on making payroll or the profit. I say making payroll, but that's not always the thing you've got to get done. And then I learned that, it's all interrelated. My health was deteriorating and it was not helping my business. And I did read about workplaces where people have fun are 25% more productive. So I literally sent out a memo insisting everybody start having fun or they'd be fired. They knew it was a joke. But I now regret I probably would not send that to any employee ever again. But back in the 90s, it was even as a joke, it was the wrong thing to do. But I love that concept of why not have more fun? And of course, Silicon Valley taught us when they all got rich for replicating software with no manufacturing costs. They had to spend the money on something, and they wanted to take care of their employees. We do want the microserfs or the Googlers to stay all day, all night, and keep coding. And so we'll do their dry cleaning for them, and we'll have on-site daycare, and we'll feed you all sorts of snacks and give you lots of caffeine and give you no reason to ever leave the building. But that's not the real world. We all have families, all have other things to do. So to me, that's where I learned this connection thing. And so if I go and get a massage, I'm helping. One, I'm probably coming up with creative thoughts because I don't stop otherwise. And that's what I do here, because if I shut up, you're going to give me an answer, and I'm going to be thinking about stuff, and it's great. So connection to the complex world. And if you're ready, I got another question, or do you want to comment?
Let me just make one point on that. So you talked about health and how in certain, whether you call it work-life balance or any other name, sometimes things that are healthy, whether for an individual or relationship, family, the startup, community, the world, these kinds of short-term, I'm just a little tired, that leads into a long-term issue, debt, all these kinds of things. So that's a systems design perspective about connecting the macro and the micro, short and long time scale, and health of a person's body, again, of all these scales. That's complexity thinking. That's as it is. It is really that way. And so when we want to think about designing and including people in the co-design process about these systems. So it's like, cool, you figured out something that works for your health and your situation. Were there tools that helped you, or were there flowcharts or specific understandings that helped you understand that health was a complex outcome, and therefore there was nonlinear associations between cause and effect, or there's many interacting subunits? So then we draw in this whole toolkit and this whole understanding, and really importantly, this whole community. And then people say, we want you to be healthy. So here's actually how we're going to schedule our events so that your participation can be a healthy, integrated piece of your complexity journey. So it's not just like there's some content, there's no tests, there's no degree, it's not a class, it's not a grade, it's participation. And that's really the most important thing.
It's an interesting thing, because often with the complexity of the world and the many deadlines and interacting things, I'm going through this with a project I'm working on this week, where we got rid of a person, and they left. I mean, hate to say, it's not like we fired them. But anyway, so now it's dropped on me, and I wanted to get in the business and figure out what was going on. And I'm answering emails from somebody in India asking why we won't ship him something for free. And why would I do that? Or asking me, do you have jobs? And I'm going like, well, no, we're not hiring. There's actually no jobs in this organization, all independent contractors, and we have more than enough. And thanks for asking, but you're coming to the wrong place. And well, can you help me get a job? And I'm going like, that's not what I'm here for. I don't build nuclear reactors. I didn't say this to him. I don't build nuclear reactors, and I also don't, I'm not a job referral service. Sorry. And I'm having this conversation with the guy, and part of my brain is saying, you're wasting time on this kid. And then I'm going to, no, that's a human being. I want to try to help him. Beautiful thing about having a large Twitter following. Every day I can log in and somebody's asking me some question. I almost said stupid question. They're asking me a question that matters to them, and I can answer them. And sometimes it's flip and I'm entertaining my audience, and other times it's thought-provoking, and even though they're talking about something else. And then I imagine with ants, they never say any thought-provoking things to you, but you can still learn from them. Yeah, making this practical. How do you take what the ants do and turn that into something that's going to help my business?
All right. Well, a few things. First off, it's great that you're providing all these various helpful services, and I probably would think that in these relationships amongst your fans, there's edges that become strengthened. People who align around your content, they meet each other, maybe a startup forms. So it's very similar with complexity, where it's kind of like a strange attractor, or it's like a North Star, where people who are interested in systems change, in inclusive, in participatory, diverse teams, these kinds of people, beginner's mind, they gravitate towards this attractor. And out of there arises peer-to-peer mentorship. So you can often probably be, you're kind of like the eye of Mordor. You know, you can scan, oh, this person, the email, I'm going to give them half an hour. That's great. But it's a laser focus because it actually takes up one person's time. And so what would be amazing in very Web 3.0, very distributed, very decentralized, very ant colony-like, would be having participatory cultures of peer mentorship, long-term success, accessible onboarding, personalized approaches that include just not the like, click, share sphere that we've seen many of the shortcomings of in the past and in the coming years, but rather something that was more like an opt-in and a higher trust, multiple overlapping spheres space.
Well, and it's interesting because I've seen that grow. But, you know, at one time I ran a brick and mortar business and we started selling stuff on the internet, but it was entirely by people calling us. And we had a support site, and actually the business was separate from the support site. At least there were two websites. And back in that day, you know, it was really hard to integrate or whatever. But I always had the approach that instead of you're buying from Walmart.com is different than buying from Walmart. Like you can't take a product you bought online back to the store. And that was the norm as they were setting up those things in the 90s and early aughts. And I thought that was just so weird because if somebody bought something from me online and I shipped it to them and they walked in my front door, we would greet them. You know, we were one small business. We could do that. We had manufacturing and some what do you call it? Service and you know, and supplies for the equipment we were selling. And then, you know, but then it was just units online, eyeballs looking at traffic, but you still had to get human with those people. So what I found is when I sat down and started answering support questions, our business went up, but I couldn't connect. We didn't have like those support questions. We couldn't even get into our CRM. You know, we had 50,000 people in our mailing list and customers that were for the business, but I get, you know, a dozen emails in a day, and most of them would say, I have my computer is broke. What should I do? And I give them, oh, you got a printer. Here's what you do. You know, have you tried turning it off and back on again? You know, all those kind of things, right? So I wrote up one email and sent it to them. So semi-automation, but I found that if I did that and I was involved, I learned what the people were looking for. I understood them better. And so I'm doing that right now and breaking into it. But so I have a bias towards saying we don't want a tool that we can turn on. I don't want a customer service chatbot that takes over, but I do want a chat box that helps the person get to the right place and hone down what they want. Because as a user, if I'm on a website and there's a chat box, I'm going to ask it a question and hope to get an answer. I find that usually by the time I'm looking for an answer like that, I'm asking questions that aren't in the database or in the knowledge base. But it's good that we're interacting with these. I want the doctor to diagnose what somebody needs and then spend time with the patient because his AI got him the answer fast.
Let me say something like that and bring it back to ants for you. Okay, so.
Well, it is all centered on ants.
I guess it is sometimes. So what you said about melding the best of personalized service with the best of automated service really resonated, because it's kind of like this best of both worlds, or the best possible compromise, where we could keep a center and a focus with the human experience and all of the ranges of it and the narratives that people have about their interactions with technology, because that's what we're designing for. Then the system is abstracted in certain ways for certain people that help them, or there's interfaces that help them operate it. So that's really interesting about how you were put into this other role that you weren't familiar with. And sometimes in your experience, it sounds like you learned a lot from it, some career stages or some assignments or like reallocations, but then the one last week was like not worth your time. And so that is like this idea of division of labor or task allocation in the ant colony. So you can imagine if a bunch of one type of task at an instant moment is taken out, other workers that previously were performing that other tasks will shift to the one that was depleted. So there's a lot of work showing this.
I have a large network. A bunch of people follow me on social media. I talk to somebody in Nigeria at least once a day, wondering why I'm there. But I know my brand is I'm the guy that's present in doing this, and I thoroughly enjoy it. So it's not that I spend an hour or two in a day doing it. It's that I am doing that. That's my brand. I'm working on what part is my main marketing for who I am over the last 12 years. And, and so, I want to maintain that. And at the same time, I see this and I want to teach somebody else to do it. You can't just turn that over to a bot. I just found a person writing Facebook posts for a page that no one goes to. There's no likes or shares or comments on it. And every day she posts something new, because she was assigned to do that because another page that has 400,000 people on it gets thousands of interactions. And so she takes that, and maybe she copies them. I'm assuming she does. But she was told, do the other, we don't know about Facebook. You go take care of this. And she was told to fulfill that assignment. And like a bad robot that you tell, maximize the number of strawberries you can grow in the field, and he ends up killing everybody in the world, so the whole planet becomes a strawberry farm. That's the part of AI that scares me. It's not they become sentient and decide that they don't need the humans anymore. First of all, if that happens, we can't do anything. But it's the strawberry experiment going through it, or customer service person that I'm paying, whatever it is. I don't care if it's 10 cents or hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars. And they're just like churning out this thing, and I can't stop them because I've got to take the time to sit with that person and say, here's how you really do it. You interact with people. And that means you got to be real. And that also means I got to pay them a little bit more. And maybe I need to buy them a tool that'll help them queue up all those funny memes and quotes and articles that she finds to share, and that those will be on a schedule, and then she can sit there an hour a day and do what I do. And if I could teach people to do that, I've got something. I think as we move into AI, that's going to be possible. So what are we talking about? Human and machine interaction. So instead of getting rid of jobs, enhancing jobs.
Let me build on that enhancing. So people often talk about AI, artificial intelligence, and that's kind of like in my field of biology, people talk about artificial versus natural selection, but actually it's just selection. And then there's different niches where selection occurs. So one helpful framing is, first off, from complexity, to think about the machine intelligence, machine learning, artificial intelligence. Level one is just thinking of it as in multiple cognitive systems that are interacting, different kinds of systems that are interacting. That's one layer. And then where I like to enter in with the basically human centric, reminder is that we could call AI IA, intelligence augmentation. So this stuff that we're working with, it's amazing. It facilitates all these conversations, and it's an augmentation of our intelligence, whether it's a script that lives on the blockchain like a smart contract, or whether it's a data center code, or whatever it happens to be, it's augmented human intelligence. It's part of our niche. And so that helps us design the niche that we want to live in. So yes, there's narratives and projections about AI that's gone amok or astray into these various different sci-fi scenarios. But right now, we can start thinking about how we want to design the niche that we want to augment ourselves in.
I'm thinking about calculators. when calculators were brand new, my dad did tax preparation as a side business, to working in the steel mill. So weird combination, but he got into this and he could, and so he had an adding machine, and it was like, a big thing that he had to plug in when he went to somebody's house and prepared their taxes, and the tape would come out and, add up a bunch of receipts or numbers or whatever. There were no spreadsheets. And so when a calculator came out, he bought one of the first ones, the electronic calculator. It still had big, heavy AC power cord. I remember that thing. Like, why does it need the power to, run a small country coming out of the wall? And he would turn on and it would add and subtract. That's all he used it for. It could multiply, but I think to multiply, like an old mechanical adding machine, you put in the number and then just hit plus the number of times you needed to multiply. The calculator might have had some more to that. And I actually left home, and during that time, calculators hit. And I remember I was in Malaysia, and I saw a calculator, and it was like $10. And I got, this is the coolest thing ever. And it was still like bigger than a smartphone. And it maybe did, square root. But, it's a little bit more. And how great that thing was. Fast forward a few years later, I was still having conversations with people that said, it was 20 years after that. In the 90s, people were telling me, as I was running for school board, that pushing technology wouldn't do because the kids are learning all wrong. They're learning to use a calculator and not think. And that resistance to one is the same resistance we get now to AI. And by the way, when I say AI, I mean augmented intelligence. Never artificial. There's nothing artificial about AI. Humans invented it just like any other tool.
Nice.
I like AI as a term. We all use it, but I almost never get into a serious conversation without it coming up. And you brought it up, and thank you. That it's tools. We all learned to carry a smartphone because of all the things it could do. My brain is augmented. I am not the same person I was when I got that first calculator. And here, 43 years later, since I owned my first calculator, and I would literally sit and play with it. And there's not even the putting the right letters and turn it upside down and it says something. None of that, just basic. Wow, I can multiply 275 times 612. And look, there's the number instantly, and just in awe that it would do that. And I'm not the same person. If I'd have gone another 10, 20 years without using a calculator every day, I would have developed differently. Try to correct my English there. And so how are we going to get people to understand that these technologies are actually their friends? We're not putting up 5G towers so that we can read their minds.
There's a lot of aspects to what you said, but there's nothing that is simply good or bad, especially across value frameworks, salt or sugar or protein,
right?
Nutrients, it doesn't matter. And so it's always about the tool use, just like you brought up. And so when we start thinking about the field of action of a developing child and of a developing community and society, we think, okay, how do we want to shape this field of action for different nestmates, so to speak? And people have a lot of preconceptions and baggage about ants. They think there's mind control techniques. They think there's long range, instantaneous communication, soldiers. There's the panoply of misconceptions, myth-conceptions. It's all
we're putting
good.
in the 5G towers so we can talk to the ants and have them take over.
The only part is that nature does not map onto us in the way that any single person wants to have dominance over. And so abstractions from the ants, just they are starting point. That's why complexity is kind of like this 10th pole North Star, because we can't just go from the ant trails to the self-driving car. You're going to get caught up in the details, and there's this many gigabytes of RAM and this two antennas. It's going to be all over the place. So you got to pull back to systems thinking, and that's as it is. So you got to pull back to, hey, at what scale do the cars kind of look like ants, or what is an evacuation like scenario for ants? And so again, complexity, it entails a lot of these interesting fields. And so there's a lot of fractal rabbit holes. There's a lot of journeys and there's a lot of collaborators and colleagues. But at the same time, it's just about showing up at the system with attention as you see it and working on a project with a team and with a community and with mentorship to fulfill actions. And so really to make things happen based upon values. So it's not about abstracting away from who we are. It's about being who we are effectively.
And you know what I've learned today, which might by the time we post this as a podcast be the title, is that distributed is complex, and that's a good thing. A single server storing all the data has a point of failure that you have to worry about. Even with backups and everything, you just have a second location. It's better. In my days back in the small business, I always had what if everything there's a fire, or I've been under lockdown, or the landlord takes over the building, or some weird scenario or act of war. What am I going to do? Well, I got my contact list. It's on a floppy disk that I took home. I'd be able to start something. I'd have to find a computer and do that. Today, it's like I got my smartphone. It's not the hardware; it's what it's connected to, and I'm fine. But as we get into distributed systems, I'm currently relying on Apple and Verizon to keep my data. I do have other things like that. I'm so much more backed up than anybody I ever dealt with who's trying to get a backup solution. I literally do not buy a backup solution because there's so many copies of everything I do, and I pull that back to distributed systems in everything that we do, including the fact that every remote worker is going to be some kind of a node. And
let me just say one thing to that.
That's complex by nature.
Paradigm. But another way to think of it is we can take the complexity approach when we address specific problems. So that's complexity as an approach, and not just like defining, okay, who's a complex system, who's not a complex system, because they're all complex systems or whatever. It's more about whether we take the complexity approach. So
a human being with its trillions of interactions and cells and atoms going on is a complex system.
And for the data distributed system, it also is really, really interrelated with problems such as distributed governance, facilitation, moderation, curation, algorithms. You can't just solve one part of the problem alone. There's no part of the stack that is resilient, or it's like the best chess move of all boards. It's like, it's not going to happen. The best business.
Yeah. It's like every marketer and salesman is telling you, you need this one thing. The secret to success is push this button. No, it's not. It's never one thing. I'm sorry, Curly. It's not one thing. City Slickers reference.
So what do we do? What do we do when it's not just one thing? We can build the team, the community, the approach. We can mentor. We can raise up the young. We can develop our niche to be better. And that's in a big way what complexity is. But again, it's for everyone to discover for themselves.
Well, yeah, I'm a big believer in one person can make a huge difference. It's a wonderful life. But at the same time, that'd be nothing. George wouldn't have been doing well in It's a Wonderful Life if he didn't have the community that he was with. All those people changed, and of course in the movie were not as well off because he had never lived. But we're all George Bailey. We all make an impact on what we do. But thinking that I've got to do it, I've got to be the one that does everything is not the approach to work in a complex distributed system. And of course, I knew, tried to take the other side of this conversation, but I've always known that, or not always, but for decades, since I read about complexity is not complicated. It's complex. It's not hard. It's not, it can be a simple system. Ants can be complex, but an ant is a simple animal.
Well, inside of the ant, there's the tissue, so it's fractal. And in light of that, nature, which is just nature as it is, we just say complexity, and it might as well be simplicity theory. Because if you find a few simple rules that dictate how a certain system, is a wave or an ant colony or cloud, how do these things work? You find that there's 3 rules. Was it simple or was it complex?
That sums it up then, because, we really are back from where we started. We're going after simplicity. I know I've changed by knowing you we talked last week, and then we decided to put you on the podcast. And in just that much knowing you and checking out a few websites, I'm going like, I'm different. I have a different approach. I'm saying this different. I'm thinking about this different. And that's kind of impact we need to have in the distributed world of the future.
And same from myself, Warren. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your audience, and learned multiple things I could say the exact same about you. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I think that wraps it up. We could talk for hours. I know. I think we went double our allotted time last week.
Part two.
And I feel like we haven't delved into anything. But I do want to give another plug for complexityweekend.com. And there's an event involved, but mostly it's the community of the people that are looking at this. So if you have the least bit of interest, if you're still listening after all this time, go to Complexity Weekend. I've started talking about other word forms that have about messed it up. Complexitywork.com, and we can find you online there, and Daniel Friedman. So we'll try to include in the show notes some other social media ways to reach him, and let's continue this distributed conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Warren. Talk to you later.
Okay, I think we're still broadcasting, but that's kind of weird. We'll just hang up and we'll be okay. I've got another call in a couple of minutes. Really appreciate it. I'll get to